Yes. Prostitution ring, organized crime. Ronda, do you want to be at the press conference when we announce it? Oh, by the way, there are still a couple of them out on the loose. No, I don't want to be at the press conference when we announce it. You guys do your job, I'll do mine. When I have to take an out front position, I do take an out front position, and I take a beating for it. But it's part of my job. For now, any questions? Yes, sir?
That's one of the high ones that I do see a lot of public access. And I don't really understand it fully, but you don't want it aired anymore. That's what it is. I've got to think you further on the whole deal.
How many of you have followed it? Consider yourself to have followed the debate. Okay. How many of you just generally know something about public access, blah, blah, blah? All right. Well, let me explain to you how it happens. What grade are y'all in? Oh, y'all are seniors? About 17 and 18? I'm not going to shock you. I don't want to shock you. I'm sensitive to that, but I am going to talk to you in terms that I've used to newspaper reporters, by the way. I got a call. I actually got a letter from a constituent who said, I was watching this program. You can't believe the program. You're going to have to watch it and see. And I said, and I believe it's obscene. Now, it's funded by taxpayer money. It's absolutely funded by taxpayer money. Do not be deceived. People will say, oh, it's funded by cable fees on your cable bill. That's wrong, false, wrong, 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 wrong. I don't know why they keep saying it. I don't know why they will not acknowledge that that is not the truth. It is funded by our general ad valorem revenue. That's property taxes goes into the general revenue bill. When we do our trim notice that comes out in the property notice, it's part of that whole budget discussion. People who say that it is not funded, and this is a very important point, people who say that it's not funded and it's funded by cable fees are wrong, ignorant, or deliberately trying to mislead you. That's all there is to it. Can't possibly be another way. Hold on. I'll take questions in just a second. So we fund it. We choose to fund this public access station. They came to us and they said, in exchange for taxpayer money, we will agree to abide by these terms. First, we're not going to show anything obscene. Second, the television show, if there's going to be any adult content on it, it's going to have a warning. It's going to say before, during, and after. Warning, this is adult content, parent or parental advisory on it. Before, during, and after, it's supposed to do that. They're supposed to have releases, signed copyright releases. They're not supposed to, there's a variety of things that they're supposed to be doing. So I go and I get a copy of this tape. I look at the tape. It consists of a man, young man, about your age, 19 or 20-ish or so, and he's reading, he's dressed up as a nun with an upside-down cross and all kinds of other ridiculous things with a fur coat and other kind of stuff that he's doing, but set that aside. He's reading to children. They're not children in the present, okay? He's saying boys and girls, reading a children's book, not a fake book that he's saying. It's actually a children's book that my daughter, who's 3.5, would pick up and read, like Farmer John. This is a goose, and a goose is blah, 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 and just being silly. And now he intersperses that with, this is a vagina, boys and girls, and he shows an up-close picture of a woman's vagina who is in a shower. She lays down. It's a close-up shot. She has a clitoral piercing. You can see the shot is so close that you can see her urethra. We're not talking about bare boobs here. We're not talking about Botticelli or the statue of David. We're talking about a lady who gets down on the floor on the bathtub and masturbates. There are other pictures in this television show on multiple stages where a woman puts a hood over her head, completely nude, and masturbates with the end of the flagpole. And that's paid for by your tax dollars and my tax dollars. And so the question arises, lots of questions arise. One of the questions that arises is that obscene. Pornography is not against the law, but it's against our contract to say it's obscene. I watch the tape and I say, was there an adult advisory before, during, and after? That's an easy thing to do, right? No. The answer to the question is no. And I asked the public access people, they came before the board and I said, why did you not say that this is adult content? And they said, we cannot say it's adult content because the producer of the show does not agree that it's adult content. And we cannot censor. If he doesn't check the box on the form that this is adult content, then we cannot say to him that's adult content, and consequently it can be shown at any time. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? So then I have to ask the question, send it over to the state attorney, how do we determine obscenity? The Supreme Court says it has to be by community standards. One of the ways you do that is you impanel the grand jury, and you ask the grand jury, you know what the grand jury is? Just folks. And the folks look at it and say, is this obscene? They're different. Are we talking about boobs here? Are we talking about a woman's bottom? Are we talking about something more than that? And where is the line? In my view, public access is asking where the line is. Another thing that they did was they showed a person committing suicide. The guy was a public servant up in Pennsylvania. He stuck a gun in his mouth. Meanwhile, the host is saying, come on, do it, do it, do it, do it, come on, this is the coolest, crazy, this is so cool. The guy put the gun in his mouth, showed it up close. He did this at a press conference, blew the top of his head out. I've never seen so much blood in all my life. I never knew that that's what happens, you know, when you see it on television or something. A real life suicide, you don't know that the blood flows like a faucet. And he looks like a different man when and then the guy's taking calls from 13-year-old kids going, man, wasn't that the coolest crazy dude ever? There were multiple things. There was a woman in Ybor City, in downtown Ybor City during the Gasparilla Night Parade. There are 42 seconds of video footage. 42 seconds where this woman is surrounded by about 50 guys. They're beating the crap out of her. They are beating her. They pick her up in the air, they slam her down onto the pavement, they're kicking her, and they're dancing around her, and the host is saying, so cool. Yeah, watch this. Watch this. What did you say, white chick? Boom! Watch him hit her. Boom! He's hitting her. That's paid for by your tax dollars or my tax dollars. So the question is that the First Amendment? Well, I'm an attorney, and I say, you know what? Tell me this. Traditional free speech venues include sidewalks, roads, parks, public venues, right? Not private, not like Walmart, but public venues. Please tell me, what park would you go to where a woman could completely disrobe, lay down, spread her legs, and masturbate with a flagpole and not be arrested? Name it. Name it. Doesn't happen. So why is it that if it is a television station funded by tax dollars, it rises to a separate First Amendment level? Why can't we have different standards for that? Why not? We have every other standard on the First Amendment basis, every other standard. And because it somehow involves nudity, we're supposed to be, tiptoeing around it. And so then, as a result of this, everything that I have been attacked, let me just say to you, my opponents have attacked my hair, they've attacked I have a cleft lip, they've attacked my makeup, they've attacked my clothes, they've attacked my sex life with my husband, they've attacked my house. They had a program where they took call-in shows from men where they talked about coming out to my house, creeping up behind me and raping me and sodomizing me. They took calls where they described in every manner of detail what they would like to do sexually to my body from men, clearly men who were deranged and stoned and, very explicit. And that's all protected by the First Amendment. Even though that there are other courses, am I out of time?
No, you're fine.
Even though there are other lawsuits in just Pinellas County. A guy sent a threatening letter to some judges over there, and the judge's wife that said this is way before September 11th, by the way, that this paper is dusted with some special thing and you're going to die, signed it Oscar Wilde. He was prosecuted, went to jail. And that was upheld by the second DCA and said that's a violation because there's a Florida statute directly on point. You're not allowed to threaten a public servant in the course of their duties. But because I'm a woman and I'm taking this stand, the message that I received is that if you're a woman and you're a public servant, you should completely expect to be sexually humiliated and degraded for taking a position. It is okay to say whatever you want to a woman. And I will say to you, I've never heard that done to a man in all of my time in public service, where they've taken a position and they have taken calls and people and men were allowed to say, I'm going to come out to your house and rape you, sneak up behind you, and sodomize you, and describe it in very explicit, filthy detail, and not be protected. What did I do? When I got a concealed weapons permit, and then wound up in the paper. What would you do? What would you do? So, that's my story. Yes, sir.
I agree that they should be doing that kind of things on there, but wouldn't you just get law enforcement involved in that? Because this is like a public forum and protected. You can't destroy public forum on freedom of speech or something like that?
Tried all of that. Nobody wants to touch it.
Is it a moral or is it a budget issue?
In my view, it's a budget issue. When we have situations like, for instance, I have $300,000 worth of baseball park lights that have to go in down to this park. We're in a budget year. And not only that, but with the class size amendment and with the war, we're going to have a bunch of reservists that are called up as part of the war. We've got these budget issues. We got limited resources. What do we fund? Do I believe that funding, that any money whatsoever should go to something that contributes to the decline of our community? The answer to the question for me is no. There's nothing redeeming about that. There's nothing redeeming that would make me say that, when I'm competing for limited resources, that I would choose that funding over funding any other thing, a fire station, any other thing. There's nothing that would do that. People say, oh, but think of all the good that's done. There's lots of religious programming on there, Rhonda. You're a religious person. How can you shut up that religious programming? And you know what I say to that? There are people who have been engaged in the ministry, who have, officiated at funerals, who have counseled sick and dying people, who have engaged in weddings, who have done wonderful things on the spiritual side. They have this pesky little problem. And that pesky little problem includes abusing children, pedophiles. And we all have read about that in the paper. What did we say in that case? Did we say in that case, you know what? Good that he did. Think of how many funerals he officiated over. Think of how many confessions he heard. Why my brother was a raving alcoholic and he saved him from the brink of alcoholism. We should forgive him and let him continue to be around children and let him continue to practice. And he shouldn't be punished for sexually molesting this little 7-year-old or 8-year-old. Meanwhile, we have little girls, 5-year-old little girls who are being snatched off their front porch as they play and beheaded and raped and sent out into the wilderness. And I'm asking you the question, why should we fund something? Why should we fund something when you have little girls, and little boys where this kind of stuff is happening to, and you've got this guy who refuses to even acknowledge that this is adult content, and he will read to those little children and say to them, this is how God intended you to be. Let me show you. This is a duck. And in Spanish, the word for duck is boys and girls, blah, blah, blah. This is a vagina. And this is how God intended you to be. And then take calls from men and say that this is normal. This is right. And speak to children about that. Why should you fund that? Yes.
Isn't forum protected though, and the federal judge said forum was protected under the Constitution? It's freedom of speech to say that?
The federal judge has said, that's right. The federal judge has said that we stand a great likelihood of losing. Judge Moody said that.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
In reference to that, when you're talking about, for example, Playboy magazine, various men's magazines, and the fact that they cannot have access to, children do not have access to those magazines, how does the judicial system legitimize that and that forum on television where it's open for everyone to see? I want to know what their explanation is.
They don't have an explanation. He doesn't have an explanation. I don't have an explanation for this judge. I know this judge. I don't have an explanation for it. I'll tell you this. When we eliminated their funding, they filed a lawsuit. They had a box about this size full of evidence that they had delivered with their lawsuit. And the lawsuit was sent up to the judge at 4 o'clock with this much evidence. By 5, and we had no chance to respond. We, being the county, had no chance to respond. By 5 o'clock in the afternoon, he had issued an order saying that there was competent and substantial evidence to show that we would lose, and he issued the preliminary injunction. Apparently, through some heroic effort, without our opportunity to even defend or to hear our side, we hadn't had even an opportunity to respond, you understand. Typically, you get to have, in a complaint, you have the complaint and you have the answer, right? And apparently, through some heroic effort, he read all of this evidence in short of an hour, flipped through everything, was able to determine that there was competent and substantial evidence, and issued a preliminary injunction. Although he didn't put it in his order. See, he's required to put it in his order. In other words, enumerate the things that you're saying. Here's why it is. Competent substantial evidence. No, he issued the preliminary injunction, didn't even address it. Said, I find that there's competent substantial evidence, or 4 things you're supposed to check off. I find there's competent substantial evidence, on to the next point. And so he didn't address it. So then he extended it, and there was a great search for Ronda Storms. I went away on vacation. And then while I was on vacation, they wanted me to come back and issue it, and so then they answer some of the things, and so he finally issued his order on this preliminary injunction. After 30 days, he reaffirmed it. Personally, I disagree with him. I think that's why we have the court. In my view, we should appeal it. In my view, this is such an important point, it ought to go up to the 11th Circuit and then to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has ruled on public access, by the way, and what the Supreme Court has said in dicta, which is not actually in the holding, but in this discussion down here, they've said that you can cut funding of public access for budget decisions. So in order for us to get there, though, we have to get it to the 11th Circuit to appeal it. I need to get 4 votes on the Board of County Commissioners to get it there. And the answer to the question is I don't think I have the vote. I think it'll die here and we'll probably have to fund it.
Does that
Cost
mean,
more to get rid of it and then we can fund it actually, lawyer fees and all that?
Well, you know, that's always a clever response. Sure, it really costs a lot to prosecute criminals. The easy way is just to say, that is so pesky. Why do we want to do that? Why do we want to have a judicial system at all? We shouldn't do that. That's so pesky. You know what? In my view, when you're on the side of right and truth, it's worth the fight. It's worth the money.
The channel, they do have the right to get rid of the channel. The parents can call it, it's like the Playboy channel. Kids can change the Playboy channel.
No, you can't get rid of the channel.
Yeah,
It comes with your basic. Yeah, that's right. You have to go get a special box. You have to go down there and get a special box, but you still have to pay for it. Your mother still pays for it. Why should my tax money go to do that? Why should it? What's the basis?
Public forum, can't get rid of it in the Constitution.
Yes, you can get rid of it in the Constitution. Yes, you can. There are other forums that you can't get rid of it. Answer the question. What other public forum can that happen in? That's funded. Tell me a park in Hillsborough County that can happen in.
That's different in a public situation.
Absolutely not. It's a First Amendment forum. It is the traditional First Amendment forum. Why is there a special forum just for this television station, this one particular channel? That's what they're saying. They're creating a special forum.
But
They're
television,
saying there's some other standard for the First Amendment, for this particular forum.
For instance, you can't be nude inside the studio, but you can legally film.
Oh, but they were nude inside the studio. Didn't stop them.
Well, then they
In fact, they took a picture of themselves completely nude. Oh, yes, it should, but they can't do that because then that would be censoring. And we can't seem to make them do that.
If they go against the rules and regulations of the public
My
access
point
place,
exactly. My
then-
point
then
exactly.
Why not take white chocolate off and keep public access?
And why not do that? Let me ask you a question. Why wouldn't they do that?
I thought he was suspended.
Oh, yeah, after for months and months and months I pushed, right? After for months and months and months I pushed, and then they said, fraud. All right, I guess we'll just offer this little sacrificial lamb. Meanwhile, they've got these other people that are doing it. That was my point exactly. Okay, so let's not even talk about the obscenity issue. Let's just talk about the content. Oh, I would be happy with anything, but they won't do anything. And so my deal is, forget it. They're not worth it. They're not worth it. You know how long we've been dealing with this? 10 years. 10 years. You know what we had 10 years ago? A nude guy having sex and defecating on the stage. And they promised they'd clean it up then. And your taxpayer money paid for it. You pay for it if you have a cell phone, if you don't pay any property taxes at all. If you have a beeper, you help pay for it. All of that stuff goes into the general revenue fund, and it goes to that. You don't have to have cable television to be paying for it. Did you know that? So, you talk about these things, and anyway, that's my view. Go ahead.
there wasn't a disclaimer before or anything afterwards, that was a problem.
Well, yeah, of course, there would have been a problem for me because I think that they violated the contract on a variety of areas. You know, they violated on the copyright. They didn't get the releases. They wouldn't even say they're supposed to sign releases. They're not supposed to be nude in the studio. I mean, you see pictures. On the television, on the show, they're showing people in the studio actually nude, like nude women. Just can't even describe it. In the studio, and you clearly see that that's the studio. Then they won't do anything about that. Well, that would be censored. See, what we would have to do, Commissioner Storms, is we have to view the television show first, and then decide. you know, can't, we can't do that because these are live shows, and then only happens afterwards. You're not supposed to have advertising. They had a rerun show. Now, in the heat of all of this, right? In the heat of all of this debate, do you think they're abashed? No. You know what they're saying? They're essentially flipping me the finger. We know you can't make us do anything. In fact, the chair, the woman in charge, yelled at me from the back of the boardroom, "I'm better than you. I will beat you at this. You will not win because I'm better than you." No, that might be true. But we had a whole entire show, and they had this whole cross-dressing, you know, two gay guys who were in drag and all this. And at the end of the show, they had credits. Signs now, Einstein Bagel. You know, it didn't have Einstein Bagel, but it was like this pizza place. And credit after credit after. This is like, you know when this was? This was in August they were running this show. We're in the heat. We have been talking about this and saying that you're not doing the things that you say in your contract. Why do you have sponsors for a show? It's free. We give you the television station. What did you do with that money? What did they get? What did you get from those advertisers in exchange for the thing that we're giving you for free? You're not allowed to do that. But they did it. They don't care. And the federal judge says, you know what? You can't go there because it's about speech. That means that it's carte blanche, right? You know what the Supreme Court recently held? The Supreme Court recently held that child pornography is a First Amendment protection so long as it's virtually created. In other words, so long as it's not the actual child doing the act. You can have a 2-year-old performing a sex act on a man, so long as it's, and show that on a video and in pornography, so long as you have taken that 2-year-old image and somehow manipulated it so that the 2-year-old did not actually have done it, but you've done it to the video. For instance, you had a guy who had little girls come over, and his guy had little girls come over and stay the night in his daughter's tent. And he videotaped parts of their bodies. He had little cameras sitting in there, and he videotaped these little, you know, little girl vaginas. And then he was able to take that and put it on a video. Manipulate it. Now, these little girls were not participating in any kind of sexual activity. But he took that video image and was able to make it so. The Supreme Court of the United States says that's protected under the First Amendment. Now, let me ask you this question. How long do you think it will be before that will be on your television that you pay for? Because it's protected by the First Amendment. How long? Because this is the line. The only thing they haven't shown yet is people having actual intercourse. So, they haven't shown the children yet. I expect that to be true. Yes, ma'am.
How does the implementation of federal white show go on?
Anybody who wants to go on? Anybody who wants to go on? You become a producer, you go do the classes, which you do nothing, and you go and learn to do it.
I'm trying to still figure out the legal logistics of, for example, what you just said. I know that there was a gentleman that, I don't understand why anybody would want to do this, but he was attaching cameras to the tops of his shoes.
This was here in
And
Brandon.
he was walking through like the Brandon Mall.
Yeah.
He'd stand beside a woman in a dress so that the camera could see up her dress. And he was breaking the law in doing that. I don't understand how that act, and by the way, I agree that he is breaking the law because, you know, you're basically being violated. How that can be breaking the law, and yet to take children without their parents or even, not that a 5-year-old can give consent to do anything, but especially without their parents' consent, how can you videotape a child's private parts and then, and without breaking the law, and I'm standing by you with this because I'm trying to figure out the legal logistics, and then use it as part of a video without having broken some law somewhere.
Digitally, if it's, the Supreme Court said if it's digitally created.
But in order to get the digital aspect, didn't they have to break the law to film that child to begin with?
Some of the things that they can do, and that would be very, very hard. I mean, you know, how do you identify a child by their genitalia? You know, I mean, this is, you understand? So what they can do is use that, but create digital. Have you seen digital images of people? They're not real people. I mean, we live to see the day where we can have digitally created people that look like real people, right? But they're not real people. You know what I mean? Is anybody not clear on what I'm talking about? I'm talking about stuff, I'm like in movies. You know, they can create, they look like real people, but they're not real people. They're just something that's been created. If they have been digitally created that way, then and they can be made to do. We can talk about it. A 6-month-old, a 2-year-old, anybody under 18 can be made to do any type of abomination, and that's protected by the First Amendment. Even though child molestation, child pornography is against the law. Yes, sir.
Well, isn't that because there's a victim involved in that? Isn't there really no victim involved? It's digitally created?
Of course there's no victim. You know what? People who are child molesters never use pornography, and they never take that leap. You know, those kinds of molestations are not, there's no such thing as a victimless crime in that regard.
Well, like video games, when you kill people, you don't actually kill people.
That's right, but there's a leap. There is a connection there between people who molest children and actually acting it out and reading this kind of stuff. That's why when you have child molesters and they're convicted child molesters, they're refused access to children, they're refused access to the internet. Did you know that? That's part of their sentencing. They're not allowed to stay away from pornography. I mean, they're not allowed to be around pornography. Those kind of things. Because there's a connection there. There is a connection there. Yes, ma'am.
You asked earlier if it was a moral or a budget thing. You said budget, but like, did it like start out moral and then like now the budget? Or like, if that show had never been on, do you think that county commissioners, do you think that you would still be pushing to have it cut, or?
I've been in this battle for a long time. I think that it's a complete waste of money. I think it is a complete waste of money. I think that it's an absolute waste of money. I would much rather take that money and give it to Little League, give it to a fire station. There's absolutely, why don't we, if that's the case and we're trying to create a First Amendment forum, why don't we do just like a county newspaper that everybody, just fund that? You know, if we're trying to provide, we provide parks, we provide streets, there are all kinds of First Amendment forums. We provide libraries, all kinds of First Amendment forums that we provide. This has no redeeming characteristics. There's no redeeming qualities to it. Zero. In my view, that's my view. It is completely, in my view, unworthy of public funding. Everything about it.
Part of it was all church shows.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. And now, here's an interesting thing. How come you don't say that that shouldn't be done there? Because, you know, here's an interesting thing. You got the separation of separation of church and state, right? And yet, nobody is on there saying these people are fighting. Nobody's complaining at all about any of the church shows. How does that work? Aren't we using taxpayer money to promulgate a religion? You all can't even say a prayer in school, right? But I can take your taxpayer money and have church shows and put it out there. How does that work exactly? How does it work? I mean, how do you defend that? The same First Amendment. Yes, sir.
Do you agree with giving, I forgot what it's called, where you give money for kids to go to public or private schools to...
Vouchers?
Yeah,
Yeah.
same thing basically.
No, it's not the same thing. Absolutely, it's not the same thing because we compel kids to go to school and we take their taxpayer money from them. It's never the same thing when you give back the money that you took from them in the first place. They get to be in charge of it. You took that money from them to go to school, and you told them that they have to send their kids to school, and you tell them where they have to send their kids to school. Now all you're doing is saying, okay, we're not going to do that anymore. Here's your taxpayer money back. It's not the same thing.
Well, everyone has the right to show them public access to that.
But you don't compel them to go there. You know, and what we're doing is we're compelling people to pay for that forum. That's the same thing. It would be the same thing as compelling. It's the same thing as compelling a class or a school to have a prayer. I mean, we have said that's unconstitutional. Yes, sir.
Yes, on a different note, I heard it was a couple years back about a situation with FAMU. They wanted a law school in Tampa.
Yeah.
There was a comment, I'm just trying to clarify. Is it true that you were quoted saying that we can get them through college, but we can't get them to pass the bar?
No, that's not true.
Okay.
It was true that I was quoted as saying
Okay.
we can get them through law school, but we can't get them to pass the bar.
Okay. And,
I was quoted as saying that by St. Petersburg, China's reporter.
Okay.
Would you like to know the scenario?
Yes, I would. The whole context. Yeah.
Yeah, the whole context, I appreciate it. We had, FAMU was trying to get a law school. You have to know the history of FAMU. How much time do we have?
Until 17 after.
How many minutes is that?
About 10.
Thank you.
Okay.
About 10, 12.
FAMU, in the 1960s, FAMU always had a law school. The Florida legislature, in like the middle of the night, took away the law school, and through the stroke of a pen. And so then we only had, 2 public law schools at that time, one was at FSU and one was at UF. And FAMU, historically black university, always resented the fact that they had their law school taken away. So they've seen, folks of the alumni have seen about that for a long time. Now, because we wanted some other school, some alumni in the legislature wanted a med school for them, the deal was that, okay, if you vote for me on my med school, then I will vote for you to reinstate the FAMU Law School. All fine so far, right? Doesn't involve Ronda Storms County Commissioner at all. This is a decision by the legislature. Who took away the FAMU Law School? The state legislature. All of that is true. Okay. But somehow, the legislature passes this deal, okay, we're going to have a FAMU Law School. Somehow, now all the FAMU people are going, oh, great. Somehow it becomes local government's responsibility to fund this law school. I'm going, wait a minute. Everything else is funded by state. That's a state decision funded by state money. Wait a minute. No way. That's $1 million you're going to ask me to cough up so that you can have, the city was going to cough up, city camp was going to cough up money. You have these different jurisdictions. And somehow there was some big fracas over there at the Tampa Bay Stadium and where the mall was shutting down when they had this classic, Florida Classic. And somehow that was all supposed to make me responsible for giving this $1 million. And I was like, no, I'm not fighting on that. I am not going to pay for that law school. I'm a lawyer, went to law school myself. Up before the Board of County Commissioners comes this whole bunch of FAMU classic people. Doug Jamerson, former Education Commission in the state of Florida, comes before the board, and this was the argument that people said. We need this law school, and we need you to give this money to right this historical wrong that was done in the 60s. It will give us more minority lawyers and more minority judges if you do this. We're underrepresented. In response to that, I said, that's not exactly true. Because we know, and you know, Mr. Jamerson, that the problem is not that we don't have enough lawyers and judges. The problem is not a lack of law schools. We know that we can get folks, and we know that the Florida Bar and the Board of Bar Examiners are considering this right now, this very question. This is before the Board of Bar Examiners right now, the question of raising the standard of the bar. And I said, the issue is not getting them to law school. The issue is getting them to pass the bar. And so we have these group of experts that are sitting there saying to themselves, we can get them through law school, but we can't get them to pass the bar. What are we going to do? That was the context of my quote. I also said, if you want to go, and I've said this on multiple times, you do a search, a Google search, for the Florida Bar Examiners, Board of Bar Examiners, who will find that the NAACP, President of the NAACP, have filed briefs in the Florida Supreme Court saying, do not raise the level of the passage rate of the Florida Bar. Don't do it. That's the point of discussion in law school and the legal community right now. Do you know why they don't want, the NAACP doesn't want that bar standard to be raised? Because it will have a disproportionate impact upon minorities. There is a statistical analysis that when you have standardized tests, for whatever reason, great difficulty in the minority community is the passing of standardized tests. And so, that's currently debated right now. You can go online and find the brief. Exactly. And they'll give you the analysis, they'll give you the breakdown, the percentage breakdown, and who passes, who doesn't pass. I myself know people when I studied for the bar. My girlfriend and I went over and we stayed huddled down 10 days and studied for the bar together. And I thought the whole time, oh my gosh, she's going to pass, I'm going to fail, she knows so much more than I do. Truth of the matter was, I passed, she failed. She happened to be a minority, and she was the first person who introduced me to the problem. And in fact, it's commonly discussed, except as the way that I was quoted. And I will say, you know, I'm not always the most sensitive person in the way that I speak. As you can see, I'm very strong-willed, and I speak with a lot of force. And so having to publicly apologize on multiple occasions for saying it insensitively, but the facts are the facts on that. Thanks for asking the question. Yeah.
How are FSU and US law schools funded? Are they through the county or?
Oh, no, they're state. Yeah, that's through the state university system. Yeah. It's all funded through the state university system. But, so anyway, so that's how that was, but people have tagged me, with that comment multiple times.
Yeah.
And, it comes up routinely. In fact, the day I was standing for re-election on September 10th, I got a call from a guy in Plant City, black guy. Tell me about this quote you said. What did you mean? I'm about to go to the polls. Tell me what you said. I just said, that's what I said. What I did. What I did. So. Other questions? Yes, sir.
But you said pat on the back and give money from white people.
There's what?
You said that it was a pat on the back and give money from white people.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I did say that. I said, you're not going to make me feel guilty for a bunch of stupid white people. I'm not responsible for them, for their doing it. You don't make me guilty. I'm not going to give $1 million of taxpayer money of guilt because I'm guilty for it. I had this guy, you might know him, Bill McBride, and I got into a big discussion about it. In fact, a heated discussion. We were speaking in elevated terms. And he said to me, Rhonda, you just tell me how many black people have you personally had over to your house for dinner? Same him. Bill, I don't cook. So I don't have anybody over to my house for dinner. Why don't you ask me how many people I've been 200 pounds and pregnant with no makeup on, nursing my baby in front of at my house? That's a different question. And then you'll know the color of the front of my face. Don't make me feel guilty and guilt me into giving you that money, because I'm not going to do it. You're not going to intimidate me into doing it. I didn't shut down the mall. I didn't take away the law school. You're not going to make me be hostage for $1 million for some stupid other antics of other people. It's not my responsibility. And it's not your responsibility because you didn't do it either. Why should you cough up that money? That's my view. I lost that vote, by the way, 6-1. I was the only one saying that. Yes.
Well, I remember a couple years back, there was a incident on Grove Road. There were a group of Western people who were trying to get the parking built there. Make that Western Park so they could, take the trail around the parking, provide as much as they wanted. But in order for that to be accomplished, they needed like $4 million in that. If I'm correct. All I remember is that there's something, it involved you, and as far as I know, there was no like way that you had to tell the money for that out of nowhere and kind of
Something Ronda Storms in Equestrian Park. The Dover fishing area is what you're talking about. Dover fishing area is water property, the water company property. And the Board of County Commissioners purchased that for, it's about 800 acres, and we did actually purchase it. We wound up purchasing it for the Equestrian Park. It was actually done.
yeah, and I was just wondering where the money in the first place
Well, here's the deal. Our water department, this is a complex answer. I wish it was simple. But our water department owns everything, even though it's Hillsborough County Water Department, from our bond requirements and what the stock market requires us to do. Our water department cannot just give anything away. We have to actually sell it, even if it's to itself, like to the Board of County Commissioners. So it has this 800 acres, and it has to get rid of this property, and so the Board of County Commissioners had to fund that money. Find that money. I think what we did is, if I'm remembering correctly, we found it from phosphate, because that's a reclaimed water, that's reclaimed phosphate property, and so there's a reclaimed, statewide reclaimed phosphate fund that is distributed to counties with the phosphate industry in it, and I think that's where we found the money for that, as I recall it. Yes, sir.
Yes, what's going to be done about out here in Brandon, there's a lot of new development and all. What's going to be done for, like, traffic and, like, zones and all that? Are we going to try to, like, slow down? About 2 minutes.
Yeah. So this morning I was watching this news station, and it said, and it was saying about how Type A people you know, are really pressured for time all the time. And so what is the answer, Dr. Bhupendra Gupta, in 15 seconds or less? Can you tell us how we solve this problem? Because there's no way for me to give you the answer to development and growth in 2 minutes or less. That's a long discussion. I'm happy to return and give you the information for it. But
Yeah.
we do, in fact, I was widely opposed by the development community this time. The development and builders supported my opponents because I have not been supportive of, as they, in their view, as supportive as they want me to be. They think I've put too many restrictions on growth, that I have been not approving growth fast enough in areas. So there are people who are more anti-growth than I am, but there are also people who are more pro-building than I am. And I would say that the fact that I wasn't supported by the development industry and by the builders speaks more than I can possibly say in 2 minutes. So it's very complex. The bottom line is there are property rights from the Constitution. That means that these people have vested property rights. And if we want to go in and take those development rights from people, then you guys got to suffer through a whole lot more taxes. You're not willing to do that, and so most people are not willing to pay what it would cost us to buy up those development rights. So we don't do it. That's the story.
Thank you.
You know, I ask myself that question all the time. I don't know the answer to it. She asked me, is it worth it? I don't know. I recently was in the hospital, and I had a little health issue, and my daughter, and I asked myself, is it worth it? Do people really notice? My daughter was coming to church, and my daughter's 3.5 years old, and she said, she was just running along, she's very concerned her mom was in the hospital, and she said, my mom is in the hospital, my mom is sick, my mom is in the hospital. And this person, this elderly lady, said, oh, well, tell her we help her, she feels better in the hospital, and also tell her we need a light at Lumpkin and Valrico Road. My husband happened to be standing there to hear that, and I just go to myself. I don't know, is it worth it? I don't know if it's worth it or not, but you know what? When I think about giving up my district, and I think about being loyal to my district, I go, I really don't know anybody who would be as loyal to District 4.
Thank you very much for coming in.